They don't need chains to control. They just need you to doubt yourself. Manipulation doesn't always arrive dressed in rage or threats. Sometimes it wears a smile, a gentle suggestion, a subtle tilt of the head that makes you question your reality. It's quiet, it's slow, it seeps in, drip by drip, until you're no longer sure if your choices are your own. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling exhausted, but not quite sure why? Have you ever agreed to something you didn't want because it wasn't worth the argument? Have you ever heard yourself apologize for something you weren't even sorry about? That's not compromise. That's not diplomacy. That is manipulation. And the worst part, it thrives on your silence, your politeness, your fear of conflict. But what if you could see through it? What if you could never be manipulated again? Niccolo Machiavelli once said, "Men are so simple and so obedient to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." He wasn't celebrating deception. He was exposing it. Machiavelli understood the nature of power, how it's wielded, how it's stolen, and how it's quietly surrendered without a word spoken. He knew that control doesn't need brute force. It only needs one thing: your willingness to hand over the steering wheel of your own mind. Let's go deeper. The first way people manipulate you is by disguising their needs as your responsibilities. Listen closely the next time someone says, "I just thought you'd want to. I assumed you'd be okay with it. You always do this for me." Embedded in those words is a quiet pressure, not a request, a demand in the costume of expectation. You're not being asked, you're being steered. And the more you comply, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier it is to control you. The second way, guilt. People will weaponize your empathy against you. They'll say, "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess I just care more than you do." And suddenly, you're on the defensive, trying to prove you're a good person, trying to earn back a love that was never freely given in the first place. This is what Jung meant when he warned of the shadow. Not the darkness in others, but the parts of ourselves we deny. The part that wants to be liked. The part that avoids conflict. The part that would rather betray our own needs than risk being seen as selfish. But Machiavelli would argue, a man who cannot say no is not kind. He is vulnerable. Now, this doesn't mean you must become cold or cruel. It means you must become aware. Awareness is armor. Boundaries are weapons. And silence can be a shield, but only when it's intentional, not when it's forced. You can choose to be generous without being exploited. You can care deeply without being coerced. You can say yes and still reserve the right to say no. But it starts with knowing where your power lives. It lives in your attention, in your time, in your ability to pause and question the story being sold to you. Is this what I want? Or is this what they want me to want? Is this choice born from alignment or from fear? That moment of pause, that is where freedom begins. If this message is landing with you, if you feel yourself waking up to something you've known deep down all along, hit subscribe. We go deeper like this every week, because this isn't just about spotting manipulation. It's about becoming immune to it, unshakable, rooted in self-trust so deeply. No smile, no guilt trip, no threat of rejection can sway you. The world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more grounded ones. So ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision purely for you? No fear, no guilt, no manipulation, just truth, just truth. That's where Machiavelli's rules begin, not in conquest, but in clarity. Because clarity is power. When you see things as they are, not as others paint them to be, you become dangerous. In the most beautiful way, you stop being predictable. You stop being a pawn. You start becoming sovereign. There's a reason people fear those who can't be manipulated. Because they can't be used. They can't be baited with guilt. They can't be pushed with shame. They won't bend to unspoken expectations or backroom politics. They respond instead of reacting. They ask instead of assuming. They decide instead of defaulting. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And when you're under the influence of manipulation, you begin living for appearances. You perform kindness. You pretend agreement. You plaster on politeness while burying your resentment. You live for peace on the outside, while chaos grows on the inside. But when you reclaim your power, you become what Machiavelli respected most, a lion and a fox. He famously said a ruler must be both, the lion for strength, the fox for cunning. What does that mean for you? It means you speak softly but see sharply. You protect your energy like a lion, decisive, unapologetic. But you navigate social dynamics like a fox, strategic, aware of hidden agendas, refusing to walk blindly into the traps of flattery or passive control. And no, this isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming precise. The fox doesn't hate the trap. It simply sees it for what it is and steps around it. Ask yourself, who in your life do you keep giving second chances to? Not because they've changed, but because you haven't drawn the line. Whose approval are you still chasing? Whose silence are you still afraid of? That fear is the leash, and you can remove it, not through confrontation, necessarily, but through detachment. When someone tries to manipulate you, they're reaching for a hook, a place inside you where their words can take hold, usually a need to be loved, understood, accepted, admired. But when you meet their manipulation with neutrality, the hook doesn't land. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't rush to please. You simply see it and choose not to play. That's the greatest freedom of all. Not winning the game, but realizing you don't have to join it. Jung spoke often about individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic self. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Manipulation thrives in the unconscious, in patterns you haven't questioned, in beliefs you didn't choose, in the automatic yes you say before your heart even speaks. But you can stop, pause, and choose again. The moment you become aware of the script, you can rewrite it. You can shift from reaction to response, from guilt to groundedness, from appeasement to alignment. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to explain your no. You don't have to justify your boundary. You don't owe anyone a version of you that's smaller, softer, or more convenient. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it disappoints someone. You are allowed to speak clearly, even if it disrupts the dynamic. You are allowed to walk away, even if they call you cold. That is not cruelty, that is self-respect. And self-respect, once awakened, does not go back to sleep. So ask yourself, where have I been shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort? Where have I been silencing myself to avoid rocking the boat? And what would it look like if I chose truth over comfort? Choosing truth over comfort isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a quiet revolution. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It's the silence that replaces justification. It's the pause before the word no. That word, no, small, simple, and yet the most powerful shield you will ever carry. Machiavelli understood that strength isn't about domination. It's about control of self. He wrote, men should be either treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries, for heavy ones they cannot. What does this mean for you? It means people will tolerate subtle manipulation, but the moment you dismantle it, the moment you stop playing the game, they might react. Hard. Why? Because your refusal to be manipulated reveals something to them, that they, too, are playing roles, living lies, masking motives, and your clarity terrifies them, not because you're aggressive, but because you're awake. And once you're awake, You stop needing permission. You stop waiting for validation. You stop asking, "Is this okay?" Instead, you begin asking, "Is this true for me? Is this aligned with my values? Is this a yes from my soul?" That shift changes everything, because manipulators thrive on confusion. If they can keep you unsure, they can keep you compliant. But clarity cuts through fog. And when your yes means yes, and your no means no, you become unshakable. Nietzsche said, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. You've been taught to be kind, to be accommodating, to keep the peace, but often that peace is bought at the cost of your truth. And that's not peace. That's self-abandonment. There's nothing noble about staying silent when your soul is screaming. There's nothing kind about betraying yourself so others feel comfortable. So today, you take the first step back home, back to your center, back to your integrity. Because manipulation only works when you abandon yourself. It can only take root where self-trust has withered. And rebuilding that trust means listening deeply to the tension in your chest, to the fire in your gut, to the quiet knowing that says, "This isn't right." You've felt it before, haven't you? That sinking sensation in a conversation, that subtle pressure to agree, that twist of guilt. When you say no, that's not weakness. That's your inner compass, and it's begging to be followed. You don't have to shout. You don't have to fight. You simply have to see. See the patterns. See the games. See your power quietly returning. Because power isn't always about presence. Sometimes it's about absence. The absence of over-explaining. The absence of over-giving. The absence of fear. It's the calm, quiet confidence of a person who knows who they are. Who walks into rooms not to impress but to observe. Who speaks not to be liked but to be clear. And that's where it all shifts. You stop seeking control over others and take control over yourself. If this message is landing with you, if something in your soul is nodding quietly, hit subscribe. We go deeper like this every week. And every week, we get closer to the truth. Because no one gets to own your mind. No one gets to write your script. And no one ever again gets to control you without your consent. Not because you're hard, but because you're whole. There's a certain silence that settles in you once you stop explaining your worth. It's not arrogance. It's not coldness. It's peace. The peace that comes from knowing who you are, without needing anyone else to agree. Machiavelli, in his most misunderstood brilliance, once said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Now, that line is often taken out of context, but at its core, it's not about cruelty. It's about boundaries. When people love you without respecting you, they take your time. They take your energy. They take pieces of your soul bit by bit while smiling the whole way through. But when people respect you, they pause. They consider. They think twice before crossing a line. So ask yourself, have you been choosing to be loved over being respected? Have you been bending so they'll stay? Have you been dimming so they don't feel threatened? Here's the hard truth. People who want to control you will always call your strength selfish. They'll call your clarity cold. They'll call your boundaries rude. But don't let the guilt they hand you become your compass. Because manipulation doesn't always wear a villain's face. Sometimes it smiles sweetly. Sometimes it says, "I'm just looking out for you." Sometimes it sounds like love, but feels like pressure. The philosopher Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you do, you stop shape-shifting. You stop becoming who others need you to be. You stop being pliable." And manipulators, they don't fear anger. They don't fear confrontation. They fear sovereignty. Because once you've tasted it, once you've lived a day being fully, unapologetically you, no amount of guilt, gaslighting, or coercion can lure you back into submission. That's why the work begins inside, not with others, not with confronting them, but with confronting the places in you that still crave approval, that still seek external permission to exist. Those are the roots manipulation clings to. But when you clean those roots, when you clear the soil of people-pleasing and unworthiness, nothing can grow there except power. Real power, quiet power, not power over others, but power over self. That's what Machiavelli was truly pointing to, not the manipulation of others, but the ability to not be manipulated by them, to see the game and choose not to play, to recognize the strings being pulled and calmly set down the puppet costume, to be kind without being weak, to be open without being a doormat, to be loving without losing yourself in the process. It's not about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. And clarity has a rhythm to it, a pulse, a weight. You can feel it when you walk into a room, when your presence says everything before your words even begin. Because now you know the rules, and you've chosen to stop playing by theirs. You've written your own simple clean silent. No is a complete sentence. Your peace is not up for negotiation. And love that asks you to shrink isn't love at all. This isn't just self-help. This is self-respect. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments, daily choices, one interaction at a time. So tomorrow, when someone tries to nudge you, pressure you, sweet talk you into betraying your gut, pause, breathe, feel the shift inside you. And remember, you've been here before, but now you know the exit. But here's what no one tells you. Once you start seeing through the illusions, once you recognize the invisible strings people try to tie around your wrists, you begin to walk differently. You speak slower. You listen more deeply. You stop giving away pieces of yourself just to keep the peace. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop explaining your worth. You stop begging to be seen, and instead, you become undeniable. This is the rebirth Machiavelli spoke of, not in fire, but in clarity. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But in your case, the fear doesn't come from aggression. It comes from something far more unsettling to manipulators. You cannot be moved, not by guilt, not by charm, not by false urgency or veiled threats or backhanded praise. You begin to feel the power of inner stillness, the kind of stillness that comes from truly knowing what you will and will not allow, where your limits lie, where your dignity begins. And then, the world around you starts to change. Those who once took advantage of your silence grow uncomfortable. The manipulators retreat or escalate. And that's where many people falter. Because when you rise, resistance follows. But here's your truth. If manipulation loses its grip, it will scream, it will lie, it will cry, it will do everything to reassert its control. Don't let it. Don't flinch. This is where you must remember what Jung warned. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you do, no one else's opinion has the power to define you. You become unmoldable, unbending, not unkind, but unshakable. And this is the paradox. The moment you become immune to manipulation is also the moment you become deeply, authentically human. Not a puppet, not a performer, but a force of presence. No masks, no bargaining, no performing peace while swallowing your truth. Just presence. A man or a woman who speaks softly, but knows the weight behind their words. A soul that's not for sale. A will that can't be bent. So here's the final rule from Machiavelli that no one ever talks about. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. You must learn both. Be sharp enough to see through the game, and strong enough to walk away from the table. So now I leave you with a question. Who have you been giving your power to? And when will you take it back? Not with fury, not with revenge, but with quiet, deliberate defiance. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who cannot be manipulated. And that begins with you, right here, right now.